Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, I was gonna do a news roundup video today talking about the news from all corners of DC, from some comments from Gunn on the Superman saga side of things, and then we've got the whole Paramount and Warner Brothers thing to more, but we've also had some crazy stuff coming out of the filming of Clayface and the DCU's Gotham that the more I collected together, it's just the video just kept going on for longer and longer. So I think I'll save the other news to be discussed in a larger roundup on Monday perhaps, but honestly I don't think you're going to be left wanting much more of a Boba ramble today after this video, since there's honestly a lot to chew on here, and we're talking bat level, Flying Graysons level of stuff. I do want to say that the first things I'm going to be talking about in this video aren't what I deem spoilery. It's more just world building stuff with just a huge references from more posters seen and what this could mean for the larger DCU. But don't worry, for those of you who want to be wary of stuff like that, I will give warnings that go beyond just the simple set dressing stuff that we're covering. So, with that being said, if you go on to enjoy this video and the DCU Gotham talk, I'd really appreciate a like, use the hype button if you have it available in your location, and consider subscribing. So first up here, we need to talk about some more set dressing on Clayface that gives us even more world building. This time, thanks to Batman Jubilee, your boy Eggboy on Twitter, and WJT_211 over on Instagram, we're getting to see the DCU's Amusement Mile. And there's some really big things coming out of this, from references to Penguin and the Flying Graysons, so like you're gonna have to bear with me here. This should be all timestamped. First up, we have some photos of what Amusement Mile looks like, and I have to say it looks pretty fantastic. I mean, it's far from abandoned here, and I love the entrance to it. Like this time we're not seeing like a giant clown on the front, but rather something that looks like, to me, to be reminiscent of Clayface's mud monster head, which is very on the nose. Here is where we also get some signs for Father Knickerbocker's House of Fun, which some of you may recognize from just DC lore, also just being from the Father Knickenbocker Wax Museum, which hosted various wax figures of certain characters like Jack the Ripper, but also you can see that they're advertising on the Clayface set, which is super cool. In addition to just the wax figures of Gothamites and figures of history, they're advertising a wax figure of Roger Elliot. And as many of you know, in DC Comics, Roger Elliot was a surgeon, and he is the father of Thomas Elliot, aka Hush. So in this universe, we have Roger Elliot, whereas in Matt Reeves' Batverse, we have Edward Elliot, you know, the reporter that Carmine Falcone killed, which is where we got the whole little Hush Easter egg with regards to the Hush money payment. So that's just a bit of a difference there. So next up, behold, ladies and gentlemen, this poster that actually says, behold, the one and only Penguin Man, now at Amusement Mile. So, like I said here, time and time again, I do just want to put it out there that everyone should bear in mind that this is set dressing, and, you know, it's not always, as many productions have shown, going to be precise canon in the universe, so to speak. I just don't feel comfortable stating that as if it's a fact, or, you know, whenever you see anything on, you know, the background of a set dressing that, oh my god, this is confirmed canon, this is going to actually show up in the movie, and this is going to be, you know, what it's saying it's going to be, and that's going to be the history of the character or whatever, like verbatim, finito. Do you see what I mean? But nonetheless, this is probably, and most likely, and fairly obviously, a reference to the Penguin in the DCU, as in a similar way to how we've seen the Penguin before, such as, you know, in Batman Returns, we know that he joined the Red Triangle Circus, and he was featured as an attraction to their freak show. Well, lo and behold, guys, here we have Amusement Mile, a freak show, and a Penguin Man being advertised as a part of that freak show, with a dude also just kind of standing there looking like a cartoony penguin himself. I do want to add in that the posters we're talking about here could also be old posters at Amusement Mile, because, you know, for example, on the DCU Gotham City map, we have the Iceberg Lounge marked on there, which, as we know traditionally, is operated by the Penguin. So, you know, which is it? Like, is he still a freak show attraction at Amusement Mile known as the Penguin Man? or has he crawled out of that life to be a crime boss in Gotham during the events of Clayface in the DCU's Gotham? Now, I know there's always talk about the merge thing here, as we've already got into in this video, and fair enough if you disagree with me here. I want to have very civil discussions about this, but this, for me, this just kind of makes it harder for me to reconcile. Like, I'll talk a bit more about this a little bit later with some more significant things, you could say, but we know the past and present of Colin Farrell's Oz Cop, and that certainly didn't involve being a penguin man at Amusement Mile as a part of this freak show, and it's not something that I feel would be done to his character either, like with a merge, but rather for a completely different Penguin iteration actor and character in the DCU. Like, that's something I could totally buy, where it's, you know, perhaps been a thing in the past, or, you know, I guess you could argue as a thing that is still going on during the timeline of Clayface. Now, speaking of the timeline of Clayface, well, the next poster we get at Amusement Mile is another big one, and that's because it features the Flying Graysons. Now, everyone here should know what that means. That means frickin' Dick Grayson. Now, this is just overall like a fantastic Easter egg, and I know I could just be like, but set dressing, but like, come on, this is one that would just be a thing regardless, as it's incredibly unlikely that Gunn would skip over Dick Grayson as a character in the DCU. So we can all feel rest assured that yes, obviously the Flying Graysons were a thing, but getting back into what I was just saying, is this an old poster? It seems kind of old, so depending on when Clayface is taking place in the DCU, it could be an old poster from the days of the Flying Graysons being advertised. But, you know, at the same time, I can see arguments for why people, you know, maybe like the Penguin Man thing, it could still be taking place, dare I say it. Now, this whole thing of what I'm getting into here is a bit of a debate, because it depends on if Tom Rhys-Harries' Matt Hagen's Clayface will end up being the Clayface that we saw in Creature Commandos. Now, I know some of you might not want to entertain this at all, but I understand why people do, so I guess just hear me out here. So the reason why I think that's important is because, you know, well, the events of Creature Commandos take place recently, kind of before Superman. Like, it's not like years and years and years and years into the past. It is taking place before Superman. We have Rick Flag Sr. in it, and, well, Clayface is already Clayface during the events of Creature Commandos. But we never got a name behind Clayface, so one could argue it's one of the multiple Clayfaces that we've actually got from DC lore. Now, we know from Gunn that Clayface survived being electrocuted in Creature Commandos, and we know that Gunn told Entertainment Weekly, when being asked if, you know, they're the same, you know, the one from the movie, he responded, "I think people will find that out." So, getting back into it here, if it is the same Clayface, well, that then makes the Clayface movie that we're talking about here quite simply a prequel, where we get to see how Tom Rhys-Harries and the version of Clayface he's playing, Matt Hagen, became, and went on to become, rather, the Clayface that broke Rick Flag Sr.'s back. And thus, if it's a prequel, I can imagine, like, personally, you know, let's just say it's set 10-ish years into the past. So sometime around 2015 or so. So, you know, when examining posters like the Flying Graysons or the Penguin Man, characters like these wouldn't necessarily be in the same place they are in Gotham in the present day DCU, if that makes sense. And, you know, leaning further into this, like, the whole reason why it's even debated if Matt Hagen's Clayface is the one from Creature Commandos is because, even admittedly here for me as well, even though we haven't seen the Clayface movie, you know, that there's something about the vibe that doesn't feel like it exactly match up to the Clayface that we saw in Creature Commandos. I know there's not really much behind why there's that feeling, other than it just seems a bit off. And I get what people mean when they say that. Like, to make Tom Rhys Harries' Matt Hagen from the Clayface movie get involved with a plot from Ilana Rostovic to take over the world from Pakolistan, it kind of seems wild, doesn't it? But then again, the thing is, it could just be that whole vibe difference of from animation to live action always feels a little bit different, in the same way to how Frank Grillo's Rick Flag Sr. is much less animated, so to speak, when it comes to him reprising his role in live action in Superman and Peacemaker Season 2. So all of that is to just say that it also wouldn't surprise me at all if Gunn does just roll with it and makes the Clayface movie Clayface the same one that we see in Creature Commandos. Not to mention, when Gunn wrote Creature Commandos, that he said before even coming in as co-CEO of DC Studios, he didn't even have the pitch about Mike Flanagan's Clayface movie at that time. So that's kind of more food for thought there for how he might just still roll with making them the same, and the whole different feeling people have about both versions is maybe just a consequence of that, of which they may just kind of move past without focusing on too much. So either way here, the timeline conversation is an interesting one, because it's like, is this an old poster, even if Clayface is a prequel to present-day DCU Gotham by a few years? And if so, at this point during Clayface, is Batman early on with Grayson as his Robin? Or if you want to argue it's present-day DCU, then that would still mean to me that it's an old poster advertising the Flying Graysons, because as we've been told already, that in Brave and the Bold, Batman will have a Bat family of some size / description already, like already built up, which just makes sense the more you think about it, given that the plot surrounds Damian Wayne coming in. So with that in mind, he'd already most likely have moved beyond Dick Grayson as his Robin. But overall, from what we can tell, it seems that Matt Hagen goes to Amusement Mile, potentially with Naomi Aki's Caitlin Bates, as he appears to be with her at the diner next to Amusement Mile. The thing is, all of this is just really ambiguous, but, I just can't wait to see what all of this is going to be like brought to life. And, if Matt Hagen already has his Clayface abilities at this point, like maybe he could lose control of it at Amusement Mile and start morphing into a mud monster, and as a result scaring a bunch of people there running away from all the attractions. But up next, from DJ1711 on Twitter, this next one's kind of a big one. Possibly one of the biggest talking points of this video. We have set photos here, initially showing various set dressing that we've been familiar with recently, such as the Jokers or stand up to Gotham City Police and whatnot. But he managed to snap a shot of a garbage bin, and on that bin is a sticker which kind of also seems to be spray painted with a bat logo, with seemingly the artist's signature on it saying A.G. And yes, that is literally Robert Pattinson's Batman logo. So I know already, like, this is gonna, God, I hope that this doesn't divide people too much. And for me, I know this is gonna get called cope, but for me, again, I'm not stating this like it's a fact, and I need to kind of disclaim that because people just get mad at you for just showing your opinion when it comes to the whole merger topic. And I know if you're sick of it, like, you might not want to watch this, you can skip to the next timestamp, but this actually is quite an interesting conversation here. But I just wouldn't take this as confirmation for now. And of course, as I was editing this video, Gunn actually replied to a user asking if the merge is happening after seeing the Pattinson logo on the Clayface set. And Gunn replied, "Although the trash can is from the set, I have a hard time believing the bat was put there by the art department. But if so, it never came across my desk. I don't have time to okay every piece of set dressing." So, do you see what I mean here? With regards to this, Gunn is saying, yes, it's from the set, but he's kind of opening two possibilities here, just with regards to, he doubts A, that it was done by the art department, but B, even if it was, it never came across his desk, plus he doesn't have the time to okay every piece of set dressing. So this kind of goes into what I'm saying with how, yes, some art departments on productions do sometimes use somewhat references to even other movies within the larger lore of the franchise that it's dealing with, because, most of the time it's not always going to be seen on camera. I know that sounds like a cope to people, but this is the general kind of vibe even though it sounds like kind of cope, when I saw that bat signal to even other things like the Joker poster that came out recently being somewhat reminiscent of Joker 2019. Now, I'm going to leave in most of the original ramble that I give about the whole idea of the merger and the things that people discuss as to why it would work or how it could work. If you're sick of merger talk, you can skip this bit, but I want to leave it in because I feel like I get down to the brass tacks of why I'm skeptical about the whole idea of the merge happening. And I would love to know your guys' thoughts on what Past Boba is about to say. But for now, this is the response to the bat symbol from Gunn himself. And to anyone who is like, Boba, you're just a hater. No, I'm not. I'm just saying I'm skeptical. And that's for a few good reasons. And those reasons are just the many inconsistencies when both universes are compared, even though I know that there arguably can be some consistencies that have been seen as well. But the inconsistencies for me kind of go into the territory of like even what we've talked about today. Like, why would the Penguin be an act at, the Amusement Mile freak show when that's never been a part of Oz Cobb's story, past or present? Now, some of you may say, well, if Clayface could be a prequel, then what about Colin Farrell's Penguin's past? Well, we know his past from the show, The Penguin, and he was never the Penguin Man at a freak show on display for people's entertainment. So there's that, unless you want to be like, well, oh my god, they're gonna retcon it, though, to make, Colin Farrell's Oz Cobb canon to the freak show thing, and at that point, I'm kind of like, why do that, though? Like, do they have to do that? Even if you want to support the merge theory? Next up would be, why is the Gotham City map completely different to Matt Reeves' Gotham City map? Why is the City Hall building in both iterations completely different? And I mean totally different. And this just then trickles into other things, like the clear difference in the Gotham City seal logo, which you can then say the same for the GCPD, so on and so forth. Next up, as we talked about earlier, why is Thomas Elliot's father in the DCU set dressing referred to as Roger Elliot and not Edward Elliot? But then again, there is this bat logo, and there is that newspaper reference of Bliss, clearly being implied that it's a party drug, among other things. But I mention all of that to still say my skepticism is still at the point of, look, trust me, I completely get, like, hey, yeah, that is literally Robert Pattinson's Batman logo. But I think that this was either placed there by a fan, not DJ, by the way, who took the photo. I just want to make that clear. Or if that's too much cope for some of you, then yeah, maybe it was the art department by someone who hasn't actually comprehended the discussion that this would create. And by the way, it's not like productions haven't done this before. Now, I get why people want to debate something like, Pattinson could show up in DCU projects, and in a similar way to the whole Peacemaker change with the Justice Gang replacing the Justice League at the end of Season 1, they'll just do something like that to explain the differences in the DCU's Gotham to the Reeves Gotham. And also in conjunction with what James Gunn said, with how, certain things, like he doesn't necessarily need to be hyperfixated on certain consistencies across different projects and whatnot. I see a lot of people bringing that up. But for me, I just, for now, don't buy that Matt Reeves would be down for the whole, well, Colin Farrell's Oz Cobb, if we're talking about set dressing as evidence here, he's going to be cool with Oz Cobb being like retconned into a freak show act on Amusement Mile now, similar to Batman Returns. Again, that's if we're using set dressing as evidence in this debate, which is really what everything in this debate hinges on, really. Like all of the set dressing clues, and, I just feel like that's a hard buy for me. So again, it depends on where you lie with your views with respect to, yeah, sure, they can do the whole subtle Peacemaker Season 1 ending thing to the Batman universe. But the real kicker, or rather like the bigger question to me would be, why do any of that at all, even if you were going to do the merge? And what I mean by that is, yeah, okay, merge if you're going to merge, but why not just maintain the Matt Reeves Batverse and Gotham and character stuff if that were to be the case? Like, why add notable differences at all? Like, surely if there was going to be a merge, they would just utilize every single thing that was Matt Reeves' Gotham without any changes, other than, of course, adding Clayface into it and, further fantastical elements along the way. So, like, for me, like, this isn't really the situation of where, like, Peacemaker at the end, you needed to change the Justice League to the Justice Gang because, obviously, that was kind of a requirement. However, you know, what we're seeing here is a visual change to some extent. And as far as I can see it, like, there is no need, no requirement to do a visual change when merging Matt Reeves' Gotham to be the DCU Gotham when compared to the need, the requirement to change the Justice League to the Justice Gang in Peacemaker. So therefore, like, why not keep City Hall as the same City Hall from the Batman? Like, why change it when you're also shooting like 2 seconds down the road in the same city in Liverpool where you shot the Batman? Why change the Penguin to an amusement mile freak show act in his history, etc., etc.? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, I just think, as I just listed, there'd have to be like a whole lot of unnecessary changes happening if they wanted to do this. And sure, like, they could change that in the ways I've just gone over. But again, compared to the Peacemaker thing, that was necessary. These changes aren't necessary. So why do it? Why? I would love to know what you thought of my thoughts there, like comparing the Peacemaker change at the end and how easy and effortless it was for them to do that. They could do that with Pattinson into the DCU, but I still think the comparison there isn't the same principle or like the same talking point precisely because, again, without repeating myself too much, they were 2 different types of changes, and one was needed and one feels kind of like, why do it at all? Like, you can still merge that character without changing all of these things. Anyway, next up in terms of other DCU character references, here we have some set photos from Marsh Bubble UK. And again, big shout out to everyone who's let me use their photos in this video. It wouldn't really be possible otherwise. And it's of a nightclub that appears to be possibly owned or maybe just attended in this scene by the mob boss that we saw at the Gotham City courthouse scenes. And also, you know, we kind of know this because we've got the exact same henchmen that were present by his side in this same scene as well. But the larger thing for a lot of us, really, about this club is that it's called Vesuvius, which is a club frequented by none other than Zatanna, who even performs her magic there. Now, not to get, like, too carried away here, who knows if she's in there at this exact moment in time kind of thing, but it's still, like, you know, really cool. It's not like I expect Zatanna to show up in the bloody Clayface movie, but on the bottom line, it's still cool world building nonetheless for how all of this stuff is out there. And then the next thing we have to talk about is Matt Hagen attending a movie premiere. And there's something pretty exciting that's happening, caught in footage by Gemstar's Jar. Now, this is where I suppose I want to issue kind of a mild spoiler warning, just in case you don't want to see anything beyond set dressing stuff. There's still so much context missing from the scene and everything like that, but just in case, spoiler warning. So first of all, this is great because I just like how we'll see Matt Hagen, who, if you didn't know already, is an actor himself, attend a movie premiere like this. Now, as for whether he's in the movie, that's kind of unclear if he has like a smaller role, but we know he's not starring in it from what we can see from the movie poster, and the movie is titled The Light Between. So I think it's possible, due to what happens next, that he's just attending the premiere as he's kind of post-accident / incident from his injured face, and he's just kind of getting out there again, showing his face, all remedied, if you will. But this is where it all goes wrong, as there's a bunch of footage showing Hagen talking to someone, and then he suddenly kind of holds his hand to his face, and he starts to desperately run away, fearing, I suppose, that people may see what's happening. And if it wasn't obvious enough, yes, it appears that half his face is melting. And I think this is just going to be pretty tragic, just in the sense that I guess by this point of the movie, he'd already have encountered Caitlin Bates, who's helped him with the use of her substance from her biotech company. Now, I don't know whether they're going to call that Renuyu or something else. I have heard something like it might be called Renuyu, but that's not 100% reliable right now. But it all seems to be going well at this point, to the point of where, you know, he's confident enough to show his face at a movie premiere after the incident. It's like, okay. And then, boom, blob monster mode starts to trickle in. So all in all here, it just gets me excited seeing little snippets like this. I can only imagine this is just going to put him in such distress, and, you know, the more he uses the substance, the more he might get addicted to it, which could then lead to, you know, a higher concentrated dose being used than what it should, which could then lead to him going kind of far beyond just the face repair, but to like full body meltdown, akin to the monster that we see advertised at the front of Amusement Mile's entrance. Now, speaking of Renuyu, we have some set photos here of this building, which initially was thought to be Ace Chemicals, but I've learned that supposedly it's meant to be the factory for Renuyu. Again, take this with a grain of salt, of course, but that would make sense with what we've heard from Nexus Point News with how Caitlin Bates has a biotech company, and them having a building like this for them to develop it. It just adds up, which does remind me of Dagger Industries having a place from Feet of Clay. The thing is, Chimichanga Productions also managed to get this obscure picture, and, you know, I have to say, spoiler warning here for a bit of a plot theory. Like, again, it's a spoiler warning. I have no idea, and I can't confirm anything in the photo, but it could be something about with regards to what I'm about to say next. Nothing concrete, but it's definitely speculation linking it into the whole Feet of Clay inspiration. But here we have, at the same location, a close-up of this person, possibly a crew member, with a wrapped-up body on top of some kind of container. Now, when I link this with the whole Matt Hagen is dead newspaper that we covered in a previous video, and maybe I am putting too much from Feet of Clay into this, it kind of really feels like that moment where Roland Daggett feels like Matt Hagen outlived his usefulness with his abilities from using the Renuyu cream, which was just unique to his face at that point in time, and then they attempt to kill him by just, you know, pouring Renuyu by the truckload onto his face. So that gets to the point of where they kind of thought they killed him, but it turns out he survived, and due to the, like, huge overdose of Renuyu, it basically overloads all the cells in his body with it, and that's when, that is when, you know, and what completely transforms him into the mud monster version of the character that he goes on to be, rather than previously just being able to exclusively have the ability to shapeshift his face. Now it's his whole body. It's everywhere. But hey, I could be wrong. But regardless of whether I've paired that theory with the wrong photos here, I do think something like that could happen anyway. And I would really like if they went down a similar route for Tom Reese's Matt Hagen. And again, like, we know that Mike Flanagan was hugely inspired by Feet of Clay in his script. So with all of that being said, I would love to know your thoughts on everything I had to say in this video. You know, there might be a few other bits and pieces that I've missed out from set. You know, if there is, let me know in the comments if you want to know my thoughts on something that I failed to bring up in this video, and I'll try to reply to it when I can. But I'm just buzzing. Like, I love talking about Gotham-related stuff, and, like, considering this is, like, the next cinematic universe canonical, like, we're seeing DCU canonical Gotham first in Clayface. That's a big deal. So talking about all this stuff will have me talking for days, so I better end it here. Leave a like on it, especially if you're still watching right now. Consider hitting the hype button, and consider subscribing to stay up to date with all kinds of DC news just like this. But I'm gonna love you and leave you, so again, just thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Gothamites in the next video. Goodbye.